안녕하세요. Finally, after 2 days, after 1 week. So I'd like to express my deepest and heartfelt thanks to our hosts, the city of Jeonju and its people, and of course the CICS, especially Hani Han and Xinhua Han, but also the whole team, the whole wonderful team. And beyond the perfect organization, you really know how to welcome your guests, really. I'm very honored to be the last speaker. So many things have already been said during these 2 days. So I will not develop all my slides, although there might have new audiences in the room. And anyway, my presentation can serve as a kind of wrap-up. So, the relationship between ICH and tourism is a complex one. I think this could be the conclusion of this forum. So I'm afraid I will have to read a little bit my presentation. Thank you. Because I'm not as comfortable as my Francophone colleague Léonce, contrary to what he says. So questioning the conditions or even the possibility of a sustainable tourism linked to ICH generally raises very contrasted reactions from enthusiasm, idealism to skepticism. So as an independent consultant, I've been involved in a few tourism projects. And after I left, so this accredited NGO, the World Culture, the House of the World Culture, and also French Center for ICH, I remained part of this research working group of the ICH NGO forum that has developed the web dossier. So this presentation is based on concrete experiences on the field, in the field and discussions with various stakeholders. So we will very briefly recall some of the synergies and challenges of interactions between communities and tourism actors, stressing the importance of collaboration. And we will revisit some key guidelines that can be helpful to navigate the complexities of negotiations with the various partners involved. So I'm not going to repeat what has just been said by Joanne about tourism and the 2003 convention and its operational directives. Just to mention that, of course, before the convention, there were many tourism projects integrating ICH practices, even if these were not identified or called as such, typically within the ethical tourism movement. But as in the early years of the convention, ICH-focused tourism projects seemed quite limited, often led by NGOs. So 20 years later, the landscape has changed significantly. Now living heritage is featured in various tourism development initiatives. So of course, this reflects the success of the convention and the efforts to raise awareness of the importance of ICH. But tourism itself has also been a kind of catalyst for ICH awareness. Living heritage has attracted new economic players and political decision makers. And tourism has been a driver in this growing interest. So there was a shift in both the scale and the stakeholders involved. There are now, for example, public contracts seeking to integrate, to develop tourism strategies that integrate various forms of heritage, natural, tangible, and intangible. One of the many examples could be Alula in Saudi Arabia, that you can see on this picture. So it's an ancient oasis and a former city of the Nabatean civilization, like Petra in Jordan that you may know. So it's becoming a new major international tourist destination, still under development, by highlighting both its natural, archaeological, and living heritage, as well as its creative industries. Other initiatives aim to promote tourism in peripheral territories based on ICH, as mentioned by Robert yesterday. So to cite just one example among many, the European project called Beyond the Beach, that has been launched recently last year, aims to support the inclusion of rural and island youth through the enhancement of ICH. The partners of this project are located in some of the most popular tourist areas, Lefkas in Greece, Marie-Galante in Guadeloupe, and Mayotte, two French overseas departments, one in the Caribbean and the other one in the Indian Ocean. So I will come back later to this example. So these strategies aim not only to renew and to diversify tourist offerings in popular destinations, but also to introduce new destinations. Sorry, Martin, I didn't ask for your permission, so the interaction between ICH communities and tourism stakeholders can be mutually beneficial, as it has been reminded. You have here a Colombian tourist enjoying an ICH tour in Kazan, Botswana. So, as Robert recalled again yesterday, travelers increasingly seek immersive experiences with music, local festivals and traditions, and to engage with the host communities. So, tourism can offer new audiences for performing arts, new customers for craft products, and this can lead to improved livelihoods as creative local businesses emerge and thrive. But beyond the economic benefits, tourist interest can help ICH gain new respect and recognition, particularly among young generations. These interactions foster cultural understanding and can support the transmission of heritage skills. For instance, young people may receive training in traditional building practices or crafts or performing arts. So in other words, when well-designed and managed, tourism activities can benefit local communities by increasing the economic, the social, and the cultural value of ICH. A case in point is the Tocati International Festival of Traditional Games and Sports in Verona, Italy, that is introduced in the web dossier of the ICH NGO Forum. It was selected for the Register of Good Safeguarding Practices of the 2003 Convention, submitted by Italy, Belgium, Croatia, Cyprus, and France. So just like the Batana Eco-Museum project presented yesterday by Tamara. So this festival turns urban and tourist areas into inclusive spaces. And I find it really interesting because one of its objectives is to empower communities to secure access to public spaces and to manage public spaces, which is a main issue in touristic towns. Of course, despite its potential benefits, tourism poses significant threats to ICH if not managed appropriately with the local communities. I'm not going to develop again these risks that include phrasing of ICH, decontextualization, loss of function and meaning, and so on, and also the pressure on natural environments. So mitigating these risks requires, of course, strategic planning, and it requires open discussions among all the stakeholders involved. However, as Tamara recalled yesterday, this is possible only if the stakeholders involved respect and appreciate each other's values. So the challenges kind of multiply in large-scale tourism projects that involve diverse partners with different backgrounds and different interests. While at the same time, these large-scale projects offer great potential in terms of impact and in terms of funding, they must be approached with caution, because common pitfalls arise when projects are not developed first and foremost for and with the communities, which is often the case in large-scale projects. So when projects attempt to integrate various forms of heritage, we need to be very cautious and avoid that ICH is treated as secondary or even completely misunderstood. These projects are highly valuable because they offer the opportunity to explore collaboration within multidisciplinary teams and synergies between the UNESCO conventions. The adoption of the 2003 convention, as you know, has influenced the implementation of the 72 conventions, so the World Heritage Convention, and the recognition of the roles of the communities in the conservation of material heritage. Yet, ICH is still sometimes and inappropriately seen, understood as the stories behind the objects, the stories behind the sites or the monuments, and merely adding value to them. So this approach risks reducing ICH to a tool for building and promoting a tourist destination, while, on the contrary, it needs to be fully recognized as a set of valuable and distinct cultural practices. Another risk may lie in a maybe too optimistic and utilitarian vision of living heritage, which may overestimate its economic potential as a lever for regional development through tourism. In the project Beyond the Beach that I previously mentioned, ICH appears as a reservoir of untapped job opportunities for the young needs, you know, not in education, employment, or training. Because these island regions are home to a young population that is heavily affected by unemployment. However, the equation might not be so simple. Anyway, sustainable development is not only about income generation and job creation, but community well-being, social cohesion, and so on. These benefits are not always measurable in terms of by standard economic indicators. Yet, economic and political stakeholders often prioritize tangible returns on investment and visible results. So ICH becomes a field of intense negotiations when different stakeholders with competing interests are involved, and especially with commercial interests. While the economic dimension is crucial, it is also vital to ensure that commercial interests do not take precedence over cultural significance, as it has been reminded by several speakers. So to address these challenges, several guidelines and tools are now available that can help to anticipate these issues or to address or to correct their effects. Martin recalled yesterday there is no single recipe to guarantee a sustainable tourism based on ICH, but only specific cases. In the same way, there is not a single recipe for safeguarding living heritage, but tailored measures to address specific needs and threats to specific ICH elements. However, these resources can serve as a kind of compass to guide stakeholders during negotiations and try to ensure that tourism development remain beneficial to the communities. Among them, the ethical principles for safeguarding ICH, endorsed by the Intergovernmental Committee in 2015, they provide a very basic framework. They emphasize the empowerment of communities in safeguarding activities, including, of course, tourism development. Principle 4, for example, calls for transparent collaboration, dialogue, negotiation, and consultation with ICH communities. Another resource is the guidance note on the economic dimension of ICH that has been drafted after several expert meetings and presented last year to the Intergovernmental Committee as part of the thematic initiatives on sustainable development under the 2003 Convention. This note advocates for a flexible, heritage-sensitive and rights-based approach to inclusive planning and management of the economic dimensions of ICH and its safeguarding. And this, of course, applies to tourism activities. And finally, again, the web dossier on ICH and sustainable tourism developed by the ICH NGO Forum offers some practical advice to design and to implement projects drawing on global experience and best practices. So among the strategies highlighted to mitigate the negative impacts of tourism without losing its benefits are some of the following. First, community-led tourism development. It is about ensuring that people have control over how their ICH is presented and used in tourism, and ensuring that making decisions are aligned with their values and priorities. Second, participatory planning and management involves engaging community members in the decision-making process to ensure that tourism initiatives align with the needs and aspirations of the communities. Capacity building and education, it's crucial to provide communities with the knowledge and skills they need to manage tourism initiatives, but education also raises awareness among tourists about the importance of respecting and safeguarding living heritage. Ethical and heritage-sensitive marketing involves presenting living heritage in a way that corresponds to its context and meaning and avoiding stereotypes. But it also includes providing tourists with guidelines for behavior, promoting cultural sensitivity and encouraging support for local initiatives that contribute to safeguard living heritage. And finally, monitoring and evaluation. Assessing the impact of tourism on living heritage allows to identify potential issues, such as the exclusion of community members from decision-making process, and to make the necessary adjustments. So this offers a solid framework for integrating ICH and tourism. But is a sustainable tourism based on living heritage really achievable? Well, first, sustainable tourism suggests a balanced approach that respects intangible cultural heritage, supports local communities, and minimizes environmental impact. However, the realities of the tourism industry often conflict with these ideals, because these realities are driven by profit, market demand, and global competition. Secondly, sustainability can vary quite significantly depending on the perspectives of different stakeholders involved. For the communities, it might mean safeguarding cultural practices and ensuring that tourism does not disrupt their way of life. Whereas for tourism operators, it might mean creating a profitable business that attracts visitors year-round. So these different interpretations of sustainability can lead to conflicting priorities. And third, the impact of mass tourism, mentioned yesterday by Robert. Even tourism projects with the best intentions can contribute to creating many problems if they are not scaled to the capacity of the community. And this morning, Dr. Ryu mentioned this fire-based festival that is inscribed on the representative list since 2015. And I think it's a good example of, not a bad example, but of the complexities of management of tourism related to ICH, and especially ICH, which is inscribed on the UNESCO list. Because this festival happens normally every year on the 23rd of June in different localities in the Pyrenees Mountains, so both in Spain, France, and Andorra. Andorra is a very small country between France and Spain. And it's managed quite differently depending on the communities, but to give you some examples of bad managed of places, localities where it's not as well managed as it should be. In France, for example, in one locality, the local authorities have changed the date of the festival so that it happens on a Saturday night to attract more visitors and tourists, which does not respect the ritual, of course. And in Spain, in some localities and villages, because basically there are villages, it became so popular after it was inscribed on the UNESCO list that some of the young people, instead of practicing learning and practicing the ritual, they are busy by managing the parkings for the cars. So, you know, there is a risk of a lack of transmission, and some young people, because not all of the localities are part of the UNESCO list, so some young people living in localities that are part of the UNESCO file, they just leave the village and go to attend the ritual in another village to escape the crowds of tourists. Because it's absolutely not scaled to the capacity of the community. So, as a conclusion, sustainable tourism linked to ICH is fraught with contradictions. It requires a careful and nuanced approach that considers the needs and the perspectives of all stakeholders, but particularly of the communities whose heritage is at stake. It requires constant reflection and adaptation, because it is not enough to establish a project and assume that it will remain sustainable in the future. Because the dynamics of tourism, as well as the dynamics of ICH, are ever-changing, and what is sustainable today may not be sustainable tomorrow. I thank you for your attention. I've been very fast, so I think this leaves more time for the questions and exchanges. Thank you.